For years I've been working my way up to put 35s on this Jeep, and I'm finally about there. So I've got the new wheels and tires. I mounted them yesterday, ready to put on. But before I do that, I'm going to put on this big brake kit. So they're Blackmagic brakes, super 16-inch big brakes. It's 2 piston calipers, and in the meantime I'm also going to be replacing the ball joints and welding on some C-gussets onto the axle Cs. I took the tires off, put it on jack stands. Now's a good time if you want to scrape off any rust. I'm not going to reuse these rotors. The kit comes with new rotors, but it's a good time to do so if you want. So first thing we're going to do is remove the calipers on each side. There are 2 of these, they're 1/2 inch. They're called slide bolts. There's one here and then another one lower down, so we can pull the old caliper off. And then we should be able to just pull the whole rotor out after that, though sometimes it's rusty and a bit stuck. So now we're removing what's called the unit bearing. It's this thing. So there are 3 bolts in the back. Here's one, there was another one here, and then there's a third one here. So these bolts, here's one of them out. They're a 12-point 1/2 inch. So it's kind of an unusual one. You really need the full 12-point. So they can be hard to reach. So I have the Jeep running right now. So that way I can use the power steering to turn it to expose this bolt more so I can get my big socket on it. And we're going to do the same thing when we're trying to, when we get these bolts out, sometimes this unit bearing will be so rusted here that you won't be able to get it out. What you can do is thread in the bolt a little bit, put the socket on it, so something like this, right? And then turn your steering so this hits this axle C and will push the bolt and thereby break it for you. It's just a little trick that I've had to do in the past, but we'll see. So I'm still working on, I'm going to use the steering like I said. That's why I haven't disconnected this part yet, to turn, expose this so I can get a socket on here, and then same thing, we'll turn and get the other side. So we're going to real quick remove the cotter pin on each side, and then there's a little strange castellated washer, and then there's another flat washer beneath it. Take all that out. Next we're removing this axle nut. I just got it off. It's a 36 millimeter. So you can do this if we had left the rotor and brake on. You could have a friend step on the brakes while you get it off, or this is what I think is an easier method. So I have this bar placed here very specifically so that way, because the axle will want to spin as you try to loosen this nut. So what I do is I have this here so that way this hits the ground and this can't spin, and then I'm able to get it off with an impact gun. So once that axle nut's off, I was able to just pull out the unit bearings, and then this shaft on either side will just slide out. Next we're going to remove so it's the drag link on one end, but the tie rod on the other end, but these ball joints. So another cotter pin, we're going to bend that out, pull this out, unscrew this, I believe it's a 3/4 inch castellated nut, and then hopefully be able to bang this with like a soft mallet and pop it out. If not, we'll have to use a pickle fork. I'll show you guys if I need it, but you can rent them at AutoZone. It's basically a fork that you'd put right above there and like hammer it in and pry, so that way you can pop it out, because sometimes they get real stuck. Trick you can do that I just used if it's not budging with the soft mallet. So what I did was I threaded the castellated nut on just a little, so that way when I used the real hammer it wasn't damaging the threads, and then used the real hammer on that and it came right out. And now I'm gonna have to use the impact gun, but undo the rest and it'll drop. But I'm gonna hold it in there for now just while I get the other side off. Piece of advice is just be cautious. So I did that one fine, and then this one what I did was I barely threaded it on. I only had it barely threaded, so when I was hitting with the hammer it was damaging the threads, but it should be fine if you actually thread it on so it's only just sticking above the nut. So I just spent half an hour tapping and dyeing new threads because I totally messed them up on both the nut and the stud here. But so we're going to continue like this. Alternatively, like I said, you also don't have to do this method. You could go for the pickle fork. The only thing is the pickle fork might break your boot, but that's also a cheap, easy fix, so up to you. So next we're removing these the castellated nuts, and there were cotter pins on each of these for the upper and lower ball joints on the axle C, or the knuckle. So this is a 1/1/8, this is a 7/8. So once we get that out, again, should be hopefully able to just slide up, but if not, I'll hit it with the hammer here or here and get it to drop down and get the whole knuckle off. So next I'm going about removing the ball joints, upper and lower. I'm doing this, one, because I'm going to be welding on C-gussets and the heat while I'm doing that might destroy these, and two, I'm just going to upgrade them while I'm doing this big brake kit. So I rented this ball joint press. This is going to help us remove and put in new ones from O'Reilly. So basically, so you can see the ball joints have like a little lip. So here's the lip for this one, and then this one has a lip on the underneath. So this bottom ball joint, when it was pressed in, it's pressed in this direction, and this ball joint was pressed in this direction. And so to get them out, we're going to do the opposite. So I'm going to start with the top one and push it up, and then I'm going to come to the bottom one and push it down. But so basically, on top, since we want to just catch it, we want something with a diameter larger than this entire lip. So I've got this, which is just sitting on the axle C, so that way the clamp isn't really pressing on the down on the ball joint, it's pressing down on the axle C. Hopefully you guys can see that. So the clamp's going to rest here, and then at the bottom I have another thing that so the clamp can push on side of this and press on just the bottom of this and pop it up. And just as a note, I sprayed these with a PV blaster before I'm starting this, just maybe it'll help a little bit. Yeah, so I'll try to get a video with the top one. So it's a 13/16. I've got it on a breaker bar. We're going to turn it until the ball joint pops. So I had to use about the shadiest method ever with a large washer and a 19mm deep well in order to pop this thing, because none of the adapters that came, I got it to push up a little bit, but I couldn't get it all the way. But that actually worked. Hopefully I can do the same on the lower. And then the install, I think I've got the correct adapters for, but you can see, got the ball joint out after much ado. Here's how I've got the bottom one rigged up. Probably shouldn't have just a screw right on the top of the ball joint, but I'm not reusing it and it's working. I can see that it's sinking already. Now I wiped them down with the rag, did some brake cleaner, wiped them again, brake cleaner again, so they should be clean. So we're going to weld on these C-gussets that I bought from Barnes 4-wheel drive. So they're right here. So what I'm going to do is use a grinder, and we got to cut off these tabs and grind that flat. And then we're going to basically mock them up where they're going to sit in the axle C. I'm just going to clamp them in place and try to just basically get a gist of where I'm going to weld it, and then I'm going to take a flap grinder and grind off paint wherever I'm going to weld on all four sides. And then we'll tack weld and then do a final weld, flap grind, and then paint is the general process. But yeah, I'll go through it in a little more detail. So next I took the C-gussets, found wherever they fit best in the inner C, kind of mocked it up. Generally I'm just going to grind off the paint from here to here. And I'm going to do that on all four to help prep the surface. I've got this flap grinder. So here I've got it all cleaned up. I've got just one of the gussets clamped on. I've got my welding ground on it, and I'm just going to tack weld it in place. Then I'm going to go around and do this for all four, just tack welding them, because I'm going to prep the surface a little more and heat it up before I do the final welds. This is a forged C on this axle, so you shouldn't really need to heat it up, but it can't hurt. So once I get the four tack welded, I'm going to take a propane torch and just heat them up lightly, and then go and do a full weld down the center. I'm done welding, so now I'm going to get the flat grinder again and just clean everything before I paint it. I've got primer on. I'm in the process of painting. I'm just showing you I put the axle shaft in to test to make sure that there's no touching between my new gussets and this, and then I'm going to do the same once I get the knuckles on, make sure that the knuckles or the tie rod or drag link don't accidentally touch. If so, I'll grind down the gussets where need be. I'm about to press in the new ball joint. So this is the correct part number for the TJ Dana 44. That's 706944X. So I removed the grease caps at the bottom, and now before I do this, I'm gonna put some grease in here, and then basically it's the reverse using that press tool. So I've got this socket, and so this bottom one I'm going to do first, and I'm going to press it up from the top, and then have a larger cap that goes kind of around the entire circle just to allow it to press into place. And we're going to do that until the lip here is seated on the bottom of this axle seat. Really not a fan of this ball joint set. I'm having to gimmick up a lot of these. So here I got this little top cap on a washer. I'm not really pressing down on the lip, but I'm pressing down still kind of on the top of it. I'm hoping it works. I got it in at least. I would say if you're going to do this, maybe buy a better kit. I got this kit rented from O'Reilly's. Maybe AutoZone is a better one. They were just out when I went to get it, but I just got them done on the passenger side. That wraps up my ball joint replacement and C-gusset, weld-on C-gusset install. So this was all building up to me putting on a big brake kit with 2 piston calipers and then eventually 35s. So that's going to be the end of this video. I'll make a separate video for the next bit.